Frank Hayes had never even won a race, yet somehow, crossing the finish line at Belmont in 1923, he made history as the only jockey declared the winner after dying mid-race. Behind the miracle were a secret struggle to shed 12 pounds overnight, a warning from his mother, and a horse many believed was cursed ever after. But what truly happened that day, and could anyone have seen it coming? Frank Hayes was born in Ireland at the turn of the 20th century, the son of Margaret Hayes. As a teenager, he crossed the Atlantic with his family, settling in Brooklyn, New York around 1916. Like many new arrivals, the Hayes family carried little more than hope and a willingness to work. Frank's education was brief, shaped more by the demands of city life than by classrooms or books. He found his place among the stables, drawn to horses from an early age. By his late teens, he had secured a job as a stable hand for the Frayling family, tending horses at Belmont Park stables. The work was hard, the hours long, but Frank rarely complained. He spent his days mucking stalls, grooming horses, and learning the rhythms of the track from the ground up. His mother worried about him constantly. She knew her son's heart was not strong, and she warned him against pushing himself too far. Still, Frank held tight to his ambitions. He had never trained as a professional jockey. Most days, he watched others ride, content to handle the horses from the ground. Yet the stables offered a kind of belonging he had never found elsewhere. By the time he was 22, Frank had become a familiar face at Belmont Park, known more for his steady hands and quiet dedication than for any racing glory. When the chance came to ride Sweet Kiss, an outsider with little hope of winning, Frank saw it as more than a job. For him, it was a rare shot at something bigger, despite his mother's fears and his own inexperience in the saddle. Frank Hayes had never been lighter in his life. The call came just days before the race. Sweet Kiss's usual jockey was out, and the owner, Miss A.M. Frayling, needed a replacement. Hayes saw his chance, but there was a problem. At 142 pounds, he was far above the racing limit for steeplechase riders. The rules demanded he drop to 130 pounds if he wanted to take the mount. Refusing to let the opportunity slip away, Hayes turned to drastic measures. He ran long distances in heavy clothes, skipped meals, and sweated out every spare ounce. Friends at the stables watched him shrink day by day, his face growing hollow, his eyes set with determination. 12 pounds vanished in less than a week. The last stretch was the hardest. 10 pounds in barely 24 hours, wrung from his body through a blur of jogging, hot baths, and near starvation. By the morning of June 4th, the scales read exactly 130 pounds. Hayes barely had the strength to lace his boots, but he would not be denied. This was his first sanctioned race, a chance to ride not as a stable hand or trainer, but as a real jockey. He accepted the silks from Miss A.M. Frayling with trembling hands and climbed onto Sweet Kiss, heart pounding, nerves frayed. Every muscle ached from the punishing weight cut, but Hayes forced a smile. He had made weight. He was in the saddle. The gate loomed ahead, and the race of his life was about to begin. June 4th, 1923, the starter's bell snapped the field into motion, hooves hammering the turf as the gates flew open. Sweet Kiss, carrying 20-1 odds and a first-time jockey, surged forward in a tangle of pounding legs and flying dirt. Frank Hayes gripped the reins, every muscle taut, his frame barely holding together after days of starvation and sweat. The pack thundered toward the first jump, jockeys shouting, whips flicking, horses stretching for every inch. Sweet Kiss cleared the fence cleanly, ears flicking back for a signal that never came. Hayes sat low in the saddle, his eyes locked on the course ahead. Through the backstretch, Sweet Kiss hugged the inside rail, saving ground as rivals jostled for position. The field pressed on, every stride bringing them closer to the final bend. Spectators lined the rails, tickets clutched tight, eyes darting between favorites and the long shot in Frayling's colors. Bets had drifted in quietly that morning. most of them small, a few hopeful wagers on the outsider with the unfamiliar name. As the horses approached the last 2 furlongs, Sweet Kiss found another gear. Hayes's body slumped forward, but the filly kept her rhythm, charging toward the finish as if nothing had changed. The final fence loomed. Sweet Kiss soared over, landing with barely a stumble. Down the stretch, the field closed in, but the bay filly held her line. They flashed past the post, winning by a head. The crowd roared, the owner rushed trackside, and Sweet Kiss cantered on, covering another 100 yards before slowing to a halt. Only then did the truth begin to surface, as officials and Miss Frayling moved in for what they thought would be a celebration. Frank Hayes's collapse on the track was sudden and complete. The official cause, as recorded by newspapers and racing officials at the time, was a fatal heart attack. Without a coroner's report or autopsy, the precise reason for the attack remains uncertain, but the circumstances surrounding the race offer powerful clues. Hayes had forced his body through a rapid weight loss, 12 pounds in less than a week, with the final 10 shed in just 24 hours. Medical understanding now recognizes that such drastic dehydration and starvation can place extraordinary strain on the heart, especially when combined with extreme physical exertion. Experts today point to the dangers of sudden weight drops in athletes. Drastic loss of fluids can lead to electrolyte imbalances that disrupt the heart's rhythm. In Hayes's case, the combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and the adrenaline of a first race would have pushed his cardiovascular system to its breaking point. While some have speculated about underlying conditions, including a weak heart that his mother feared, there is no evidence from the period to confirm or deny this. What is known is that Hayes was alive when the race began, and unresponsive by the time Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line. No toxicology reports or detailed medical records exist from that day. The lack of a formal post-mortem leaves only educated guesses. Medical professionals reviewing the case a century later agree on 2 points. The heart attack was real, and the punishing weight loss almost certainly contributed. The rest is left to the limits of history and the silence of the official record. Track officials gathered near the finish, their celebration turning quickly to confusion as the truth became clear. The Jockey Club made a rare decision that afternoon. They waived the customary weigh-in and declared the result official out of respect for Frank Hayes and the extraordinary circumstances. There would be no challenge, no question about the outcome. Hayes's victory stood, recorded in the books just as it happened. 3 days later, friends and colleagues carried him to his resting place at Holy Cross Cemetery in Brooklyn. He was buried in his racing silks, the same colors he wore when he crossed the line. The ceremony was small but heartfelt, attended by those who knew him best from the stables and the track. In the days that followed, Hayes's story spread far beyond Belmont, remembered as both triumph and tragedy. Sweet Kiss never returned to the starting gate after that day. Racing records list her as a one-time winner, then silent, her name fading from the entries but not from memory. In the months that followed, stories began to swirl around the horse and her final race. Bettors and stable hands whispered about the nickname Sweet Kiss of Death, which stuck as newspapers replayed the strange victory. Some claimed the horse was cursed, that no rider dared take the mount again, while others insisted it was simple respect or superstition that kept her in retirement. No official reforms followed, and the Jockey Club made no changes to the rules. Over time, Sweet Kiss's story drifted into racing folklore, a legend suspended between fact and fable, her record forever marked by a win that no other horse could claim. Today, jockeys still face intense pressure to meet dangerous weight demands, risks unchanged for a century. Hayes's story reminds us that behind every race is a human body pushed to its limits. The line between victory and tragedy remains razor thin. What price are we willing to accept for spectacle?